The first time I realized my daughter was taking me away from my grandson. The boy was standing on my porch, with one hand over an old coffee can full of fishing lures waiting for permission he had never needed before. I had the lemonade poured. I had the porch swept. I had the little plastic box of peanut butter crackers set beside his spot, the way I always did. Evan looked down at the bright metal spinners and red and white bobbers like they might bite him, then glanced over his shoulder and said, real polite, "Mom says you get mixed up now. Is this still safe? There are things a man can hear at 71 that go deeper than insults." That was one of them. It was a Saturday in late September, still warm enough in Indiana for the porch boards to hold a little heat from the sun. My place sits just outside Franklin on a 2-lane road where people still wave from pickup trucks and slow down for tractors. The maple out front had started turning at the top, and the mums my wife used to line up on the porch each fall had been replaced by one crooked pot from the grocery store that I kept meaning to straighten. Rachel's SUV was still idling in the gravel. She came up the walk carrying her canvas tote sunglasses up in her hair, looking neat in that efficient way she always had. Not fancy, just put together in a way that made you feel like she had already thought through the next 3 hours and didn't have much patience left for surprises. "Oh, honey," she said to Evan. "Light as can be, Grandpa knows the fishing stuff. We just ask first. Now, remember, ask first now." She smiled at me when she said it, the kind of smile that was supposed to smooth the sentence flat. I felt my hand tighten around my coffee mug anyway. "Morning, kiddo," I said. I still had some trouble with certain words since the stroke. Not all of them, just enough to make me choose my way around a sentence now and then. My doctor said I was doing well. My speech therapist said the same thing. Most days I believed them until somebody looked at me a half-second too long, waiting for me to finish. Evan came up the steps and gave me a quick hug. He was 11, all elbows and knees, with a Colt's cap bent at the bill from where he kept worrying it between his fingers. He still smelled faintly like the apple shampoo Rachel bought him and the outside air from the ride over. "Hi, Grandpa." "Hi yourself." He sat down, but not with the old flop of comfort he used to have. There was a pause in him now, like somebody had moved a piece of furniture inside his mind, and he was still learning the new path around it. Rachel took the chair across from me and set her tote by her feet. "You doing okay this morning?" "I'm doing fine." "You remember what Dr. Patel said about not overdoing it?" I looked at her. "I remember what Dr. Patel said." She gave a little nod, still pleasant. "Good. I just don't want you worn out by noon." 5 years ago, before my wife died, Rachel would have come in through the kitchen door without knocking, raided the fridge and complained that I never had anything but mustard beer and half a block of cheese. Back then, she still sounded irritated around me more often than careful. After Ellen passed, something softened. Or maybe I just wanted to think it had. She started bringing casseroles. She started calling twice a week instead of twice a month. When Evan got old enough to like old coins, fishing line, and stories about when things used to cost less than $1, the visits settled into a rhythm that felt close enough to family for a man like me. A man like me. That's not false modesty. I know what kind of father I was when Rachel was little. I was there. I paid the bills. I fixed what broke. I showed up in boots and winter jackets that smelled like furnace dust and truck heat and old coffee in a thermos. But when it came to talking soft listening long or sitting still in the middle of someone else's feelings, her mother was the one she went to. By the time I learned that steady and loving were not always the same thing, Rachel had children of her own and a whole life built around not needing me much. That had been the old wound even before the stroke. The stroke just gave it a fresh name. Evan reached for a cracker and started telling me about a science project, some kind of bridge made out of popsicle sticks. I listened, asked him what kind of load it had to hold, and for a few minutes the morning felt nearly normal. He leaned forward when he talked. He used both hands, his eyes still lit up when he forgot to be cautious. Then he said, "Mom told my teacher you were sick this spring." Rachel picked up her lemonade. "Well, you were sick, Dad." "I had a stroke," I said. "I wasn't gone. No one said you were gone." It was the kind of thing that ought to have passed right there. Maybe if Ellen had been alive, it would have. She had a way of cutting a crooked conversation straight with one look. But Ellen had been gone 5 years, and this was my porch. And my daughter had started doing something lately that was harder to fight than anger. She made room around me like I was furniture that needed extra clearance. When Evan finished his crackers, I reached for the coffee can and shook it once, so the lures clinked the way he liked. He smiled on instinct, then looked to Rachel again. "That one, with the yellow feather. Still work?" he asked me. "It does if the fish are feeling generous." He grinned. Rachel checked her watch. "We'll probably keep it short today," she said. "He's got a birthday thing this afternoon, and I don't want too much excitement all in one day." "Birthday thing," Rachel blinked. "I thought I told you." "You didn't. It's nothing big. Just one of his friends from school." Evan looked between us. "Kids can feel weather changes quicker than adults." He went quiet. "All right," I said. Rachel gave me that same smoothing smile again. "We're trying to keep things simple right now, Dad." There was a lot packed into that little word, we. I let it go. I had gotten in the habit of letting things go since the stroke, mostly because I was tired of watching people mistake frustration for confusion. You raise your voice one time while searching for a word, and suddenly everybody is treating you like the raised voice is the diagnosis. So I took Evan down to the side yard instead, showed him how to cast a practice line with no hook on it, and listened to the dry flick of monofilament through the September air. He laughed when he sent it sideways into the hostas. I laughed too. Rachel sat on the porch scrolling her phone, glancing up every now and then with that same alert expression a lifeguard might wear when the swimmers were only knee-deep. When they left, Evan hugged me harder than he had when he arrived. "Can I come next Saturday?" "Far as I know," Rachel cut in before the moment settled. "We'll see how the week goes." I stood in the gravel after the SUV backed out and watched the dust fall. Then I went inside, rinsed the glasses, and set the coffee can back on the shelf in the mudroom beside the old tackle box and a can of off I still kept by the door. That Tuesday evening, I was sitting in my recliner with the local news on low when Linda called. "My sister has always sounded like she was either about to bring you a pie or tell you somebody died." There wasn't much middle ground in her voice. "You home?" she asked. "Where else would I be?" She made a small sound. "You all right?" "Sure." Rachel didn't mention the school thing. I sat up a little straighter. "What school thing?" There was a pause long enough for me to hear my refrigerator kick on in the kitchen. "Evan had that grandparents' reading night on Monday," she said. "I saw the pictures at church. Thought maybe you weren't feeling up to it." I looked over at the side table where I kept my pill organizer, my reading glasses, and the little yellow legal pad I wrote appointments on now. Monday night had been empty. Empty enough that I had eaten tomato soup from a mug and gone to bed before 10. "No," I said. "I wasn't told." Linda let that sit for a second. Maybe it slipped her mind. Maybe. After we hung up, I opened Facebook on the iPad. Rachel herself had insisted I needed to stay connected. It took me longer than it used to. My fingers still didn't always land right the first time. But I found the pictures. There was Evan in a blue school polo standing in the elementary library under paper bats and construction paper leaves taped to the windows. There was Rachel smiling beside him. There was one picture of him holding up a book toward the camera, and there, plain as daylight, was the empty space beside his shoulder where a grandfather could have stood. I stared at that photo until the screen dimmed. The next Saturday they came again, only not for long. Rachel said they had another stop to make. Evan seemed distracted, though he still lit up when I brought out the old wheat pennies in the cigar tin. He picked one up and said, "Mom said not to stay too long if you looked tired." Rachel from the kitchen doorway answered for me. "He just worries about you, Dad." "That's a good thing." I turned the penny over in my fingers. Lincoln's face was worn almost smooth. "Did he worry about me on Monday too?" I asked. Rachel's expression changed, but only around the eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "The school thing." Her mouth tightened just a fraction. "I told you things have been busy. You didn't tell me at all." She crossed one arm over herself, still controlled. "Dad, I can't do this every time something slips. I'm juggling a lot, and honestly, evenings like that can be overstimulating for you right now." Overstimulating. I almost laughed, and that would have come out meaner than I wanted. So I didn't. Evan was looking down at the pennies, not touching them anymore. Rachel must have seen it too because her voice got softer. "Come on, buddy. We need to get going." He looked at me. "Can I take the 1957 one next time?" "Sure," I said. "If there is a next time," Rachel exhaled through her nose. "That's not fair." No, I thought. It probably wasn't. But fairness had been walking out of this house in small pieces for a while now, and I was getting tired of being the only one expected to act like it hadn't. After they left, I sat on the porch until the light changed. The mums Ellen used to fuss over had gone crooked again in the pot. I didn't straighten them. An hour later, Linda pulled into the driveway with a foil pan of chicken divan I hadn't asked for. She came up the steps, set it on the porch table, and took one look at my face. So she said quietly, lowering herself into Ellen's old wicker chair, "Has she started bringing up your money yet?" Linda did not ask it like gossip. She asked it like a woman checking whether smoke had reached the hallway yet. I looked at the foil pan between us. No. She folded and unfolded the corner of a paper napkin she'd brought up with the casserole dish. "Then she will." "You don't know that." Linda gave me one of those looks only sisters can give a man in his 70s and still make him feel 12. "Walt, I know the difference between worried and steering. Your girl's been steering." I leaned back in the wicker chair and listened to a dog barking somewhere across the road. The evening had started cooling off. You could smell cut grass and the diesel from a truck on State Road 44 if the wind turned right. "She's under pressure," I said. "Single mother school bills, all the rest of it. She's also got you apologizing for being left out." That stung because it was true. Linda stayed another half hour. We ate chicken divan on trays in the living room and watched the weatherman point at a cold front coming in from Illinois. She didn't push after that. She just looked around the room once or twice, the way women do when they're taking stock of a house and the man in it at the same time. After she left, I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing forks and trying not to turn one hard question into 10 harder ones. Had Rachel started bringing up my money yet? Not directly, but once Linda said it, little things began stepping out where I could see them. The next Tuesday, Rachel called around supper. I had a pot roast warming in the oven and a game show making noise in the den. She sounded tired but organized, which was her usual way of sounding tired. "How was speech therapy?" she asked. "Fine. Did you drive yourself?" "I did." There was a pause. "You sure that's wise?" "I've been driving to town for 6 months." "I know, Dad. I just think maybe you pushed too hard because you want to prove something." That was how she did it. Nothing big enough to fight cleanly. Just a little hook under the sentence. "I don't have to prove I can buy milk and make a left turn," I said. She let that pass. I was looking at Evan's middle school packet. They're already talking about advanced placement tracks and summer programs. It's unbelievable what things cost now. I opened the oven and let the heat hit my face. Seems like everything does. Yeah. Then softer. It'd just be nice if some things were simpler. I waited. She said, "You've got so much to keep track of right now. Therapy medications, the house appointments. If something happened again, I wouldn't even know where half your paperwork is." I shut the oven door. "Why would you need to?" "Because I'm your daughter." There it was, but still not all the way out in the open. I looked at the little yellow legal pad by the phone, where I wrote down bill dates and appointment times now, mostly because after the stroke I trusted paper more than memory. My handwriting had gotten larger and slower, but it was still mine. "I've managed," I said. "I know you have." Her voice gentled, which only made me trust it less. "I'm not saying you haven't. I'm saying maybe it's time we started making things easier for everybody." Everybody. When we hung up, the roast had dried a little around the edges. I ate it anyway at the kitchen table where Ellen and I used to sit every night, unless one of us was sick or mad. Ellen had kept things in order without ever making a man feel handled. That was a gift. We'd had our rough years. Lord knows we had. I was not easy in my 40s and 50s. Too much work, too little talking, too ready to think that if the lights were on and the mortgage was paid, then love had covered its duty for the month. Rachel used to go to her mother for school forms friend trouble, broken hearts, and what to wear to the 8th grade dance. She came to me when the car wouldn't start. I used to tell myself that was just how families divided up. Men did one thing, women another. It took me too long to understand that a child notices where she is soothed and where she is merely provided for. After Ellen died, I found one of her church notebooks in the hall cabinet. Inside, she had written grocery lists, sermon lines, and reminders to herself. On one page, between green beans and call Linda, she had written, "Walt loves hard, but not always where people can feel it." I had sat on the edge of our bed with that notebook in my hands until the room blurred. That line had followed me ever since. It was half mercy and half sentence. By the end of that week, Rachel had called twice more. Both times she started with my health and ended near money. Did I still have all the old statements stacked in the den cabinet? Had I ever updated the beneficiary paperwork Ellen and I set up years back? Did I know what the tax hit would be if something had to be moved around for Evan later on? She said these things while sounding briskly concerned, like a woman packing school lunches and paying bills in the same breath. Saturday came grey and windy. No visit. Rachel texted around 11. Busy day. Evan's got a game and then homework. We'll try next week. Don't overdo it today. I stared at the message a while longer than it deserved. Then I went out to the garage and stood by the metal file cabinet I hadn't opened in months. The bottom drawer stuck in damp weather. Always had. I had to put one foot against the cabinet and tug twice. Inside were old manuals, furnace invoices from the business truck titles, a folder of Ellen's hospital bills I had never thrown away. And farther back than I remembered, a manila envelope with Martin Keene's name on the tab. For a minute I just looked at it. Then I pulled it free and took it to the workbench. I had gone to Martin 2 years before the stroke when I first started noticing that Rachel's visits got warmer any time school money came up. Not warm exactly, attentive. She would bring me chicken salad from the deli, and somewhere in the second half of the conversation ask if Ellen and I had ever set aside enough for Evan's college. She said it like a mother planning ahead. Maybe that was all it was at first. I still do not know. But one afternoon after she left, I found myself standing in the mudroom thinking, if I were gone tomorrow, I know exactly where that money would get pointed. That had shamed me. A father ought not think that way about his daughter, unless he has to. Still, I made the appointment. Now, at the workbench, I opened the envelope and spread the papers flat under the hanging shop light. The trust summary sat right on top. Date at the bottom. Signature. Witness line. Specific language about educational disbursement, direct institutional payment, restricted access, successor oversight. I ran my finger under the date once. It was 8 months before my stroke. I sat down on the stool hard enough to make it squeak. All this time since April, I had been letting Rachel's careful tone make me question what I knew about my own life. And there in front of me was proof that before my mouth had slowed down, before anybody started looking at me like a man, you had to speak around. I had already seen enough to build a wall. That should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like swallowing a stone, because the papers did not only say I was still sound. They said something worse. They said I had needed protecting from my own daughter before illness gave her any excuse to start. I sat there a long while, with the cold coming in under the garage door. Finally, I called Martin's office. He remembered me right off. "Mr. Bennett, it's Walt," I said. "I need to ask you something plain." That's usually the best way. I looked at the trust summary again. That structure we set up for my grandson. Still locked the way we discussed. It is. No parental access. Not unless you rewrote terms, and you did not. I held the phone tighter. And the distributions go straight where they're meant to go. Yes, I swallowed. You remember why I did it? Martin was quiet for a beat. You said you wanted the money to help the boy not become leverage around him. Leverage. The word went through me clean. I thanked him and hung up. Then I stayed in the garage until my knees stiffened and the shop light started drawing moths against the window. A memory came back clear, as if somebody had set it on the bench beside me. Rachel at 16, sitting in Ellen's car after I'd missed her choir solo because a restaurant freezer had gone out on a Saturday and the owner was a good customer. She had not cried. That would have been easier. She had just looked straight ahead and said, "You always show up where you're paid to." At the time, I got mad. Told her she didn't understand grown-up responsibilities. Ellen and I fought half the night over that. Now in the garage, what came back to me was not the sentence. It was the look on Rachel's face when she said it. Flat. Settled. Like something had been entered into the books. Maybe that was the wound between us. Maybe this, her measuring me now, turning presents into a transaction, was only that same old arithmetic coming home meaner. My phone buzzed in my shirt pocket just as the thought landed. It was Rachel, I answered. And before I could say much more than hello, she said in that composed voice of hers, "Dad, I think we need to sit down this week and handle all of this properly." Handle all of this properly turned out to mean Wednesday at 2:30 in Martin Keene's office over the pharmacy on Jefferson Street. Rachel said it like she was arranging a dental cleaning. I said that time worked for me. She was quiet for half a second, maybe surprised I didn't hedge or ask what she meant. Then she said, "Good. I think it's better if we get ahead of things before there's more confusion." I almost answered that the confusion seemed to be serving somebody just fine, but I let it pass. There was no point wasting a good line on the phone. Wednesday came cold and bright. The kind of Indiana afternoon where the sky looks scrubbed out and every sound in a parking lot carries farther than it ought to. I drove my truck into town with the manila folder on the passenger seat and Ellen's old pen clipped in my shirt pocket. It had been hers, a plain Blue Cross pen I'd found in the junk drawer after she died. I started carrying it to appointments without much thinking about it. That day I knew exactly why it was there. Martin's office smelled faintly of paper copier toner and the coffee his receptionist always made too strong. Rachel was already seated when I came in. She had a leather folio open on her lap and a look on her face I knew from years back from parent-teacher meetings and billing disputes and every other place where she believed she'd arrived more prepared than the room. "Dad," she said, standing halfway like courtesy had become something she had to remember. "Rachel." Martin came out from the inner office with his glasses in one hand. "Mr. Bennett." "Rachel." He shook my hand first. I appreciated that more than I let show. We sat. Rachel crossed one leg over the other and angled her body toward Martin rather than me, which told me plenty before she said a word. People do that when they want the authority in the room to become their ally. She started carefully the way she always did when she wanted to sound reasonable enough to make resistance look childish. "I know everyone's busy, so I'll just say it plainly," she said. "Dad's had a difficult year. We're all trying to protect his recovery and keep things stable for Evan, but there are still a lot of loose ends around long-term planning, and I'm concerned that if something changes suddenly, there won't be a clear enough path for decisions." Martin didn't move much. "What decisions specifically?" Rachel smoothed the edge of her folio. "Educational support, financial oversight, access if needed. Dad's always wanted to help Evan, and of course we all want that to continue. I just think we need something more streamlined, given the circumstances." Given the circumstances. There was that phrase again. Like my life had turned into weather damage. I looked at her while she spoke. Really looked. Same neat hair, same steady voice, same wedding ring from a marriage that hadn't lasted nearly as long as she once thought it would. She looked tired around the eyes. I could see that. I could also see that she had come there, expecting me to feel outpaced. For a few seconds, I didn't say anything. Let the room hold what she'd put into it. Martin turned to me. "Mr. Bennett." I laid the manila folder on the table, but kept my hand resting on it. "I'd like Rachel to finish," I said. She took that as permission. "I'm not trying to take anything from you, Dad." That was the first lie. "I'm trying to keep things from getting harder than they need to be. Evan's getting older. School costs are real. I'm juggling work, the house, his schedule, your appointments when I can, and honestly," she let out a breath like she hated having to say the rest. "Honestly, lately, I feel like I'm the only one planning for what happens next." There it was. A little self-sacrifice laid on the table beside the request. I nodded once. "You finished." Her mouth tightened. "Yes." I opened the folder and slid the trust summary across to Martin, then another copy toward Rachel. The paper made a soft sound against the table. Small sound. Big moment. "I planned for what happens next 2 years ago," I said. Rachel looked down, then back up at me. "What is this?" "What you are asking for without saying it outright." Martin adjusted his glasses and read the first page, though he already knew what it was. He was doing me the favor of making the process visible. Rachel picked up her copy. I watched her eyes move, watched the first ripple of uncertainty pass through them. "This is old," she said. "Yes," I said. "That's the point." She flipped the page. "Dad, look at the date." She did. 8 months before the stroke. 8 months before anybody started taking my pauses for weakness. 8 months before she started talking about simple and safe and best for everybody. Her face changed then, not dramatically. Rachel wasn't a dramatic woman. That was part of what made her dangerous when she wanted something. But the confidence drained out around the edges. Martin folded his hands. The trust remains in force exactly as established. Educational disbursements are restricted. Funds go directly where intended. There is no parental access route unless Mr. Bennett amends the structure, which he has not. Rachel looked at him. He never told me any of this. No, I said. I didn't. Silence sat down with us. She turned back to me, and now the calm in her voice had something sharp behind it. So you did this because you didn't trust me. That question ought to have felt like victory. Instead, it landed in the oldest sore place I had. I thought of Ellen's notebook. Walt loves hard, but not always where people can feel it. I thought of Rachel at 16 in that car, saying I always showed up where I was paid to. I thought of Evan on my porch with his hand hovering over a coffee can of fishing lures, like I might not know the difference between a hook and a child anymore. I did it, I said slowly, because I wanted what I left that boy to reach him clean. Rachel gave a small, bitter laugh. Clean from me. Don't make it smaller than it is. That shut her up for a second. I kept my hand flat on the folder. I could hear my own pulse in the bad side of my neck, but my voice stayed where I wanted it. You didn't hurt me when you asked about school money, I said. A mother worries about school money. I understand that. You hurt me when you started making my place with Evan sound like something I had to earn back from you. Her eyes flashed then. That is not what I did. No, I leaned forward just enough. Then why was he asking me if my own fishing lures were safe? Why was I finding out about reading night from church pictures? Why did every visit get shorter, right around the same time you started circling my paperwork? Color rose in her face. You had a stroke. Yes. I did. My voice came harder now, but not louder. And you used it like a handle. Martin said nothing. He didn't need to. Rachel looked from me to the papers again, as if some better arrangement might still be hidden in the margins. I was trying to protect him, she said softer now. From what? She opened her mouth. Shut it. That was the moment. Not the documents, not the lawyer. That. Because there wasn't a good answer to that question unless she told the truth, and the truth would sound ugly in any room. From uncertainty, from needing money, from the chance that an aging father might be easier to lean on than to love cleanly, from her own old anger, maybe. I could have supplied all of it for her, but I didn't. I looked at her a long moment. You know the worst part? She didn't answer. The worst part is I kept telling myself to be patient, because maybe this was the only way you knew how to come back to me. My throat tightened on that, and I had to wait a second. I let a lot pass because I thought if I stayed careful I could keep the peace and keep my grandson. That was my mistake. Rachel looked down then. Not ashamed all the way. Not yet, but no longer able to sit in that chair like the room belonged to her. Martin cleared his throat gently. For the record, Mr. Bennett's planning was made while he was fully competent. The structure is sound. There is nothing improper or unclear here. Rachel closed the folder. So that's it, I almost said. That's been it for 2 years. Instead, I said, that's Evan's future. She stood first, picked up her folio. For a second, I thought she might say something that would either mend a little or break the rest. But she only said I should go. I stayed seated. Rachel, she stopped. I'm not turning him against you. Her shoulders stiffened. That boy doesn't need one more adult using him to settle something bigger than he is. I nodded toward the papers. But you don't get to use him on me again. She didn't look back when she left. Martin walked me out after. On the stairs above the pharmacy, he said, You did the hard part before today. No, I told him. Today was the hard part. He let that stand. The next few weeks were quieter than I liked, but cleaner than before. Rachel didn't keep Evan from me completely. Maybe she knew better now. Maybe the loss of leverage changed the temperature. Visits came less often at first, then steadier. Short still, but not supervised in tone, not managed down to the inch. By November, the trees had gone mostly bare. One Saturday, Evan sat on my porch in a flannel-lined hoodie longer in the arms and legs than he'd been in September, and opened an envelope Martin had prepared in plain language for when the time was right. Not the full trust papers. Just the part a boy could understand, that there would be money for school one day set aside for him, protected for him, because his grandpa and grandma had wanted his road to be wider than theirs had been. He read, slow-moving his lips on the bigger words. "You and Grandma did this." "We did." He looked up at me. "Mom knows." "Yes." He folded the letter carefully with both hands and held it on his knee a while. Then he said something I expect I'll hear in my head the rest of my life. "Grandma always thought of everything." I smiled at that, though it hit me right in the chest. She usually did. The light was dropping across the yard, turning the last patch of grass gold out by the ditch. My coffee had gone lukewarm in the mug. Evan sat beside me in the old porch chair, not hesitant now, just quiet in the good way. The coffee can of fishing lures was by his sneaker, and this time he reached down and opened it without asking anybody first. I watched his hands move through the bright metal and feathers steady as anything. Some things do not heal the way people in movies like to pretend. A daughter can still be your daughter after she has broken something in you, but the thing stays cracked. You just learn what weight it can carry and what it can't. Still there on that porch with the boy beside me, and Ellen's planning still doing its work. Years after she'd gone, the world felt set right enough for one afternoon. Not perfect, not even close, but right enough that I could sit still in it.